I wanted to share about when I first started to tap into the fear of non-existence and what happened that day. And so I think prior to this day and this opening that happened when I was seeking quite a long time ago now, I thought I knew what existential fear was, and but I probably didn't really experientially. This is when I really started to tap into just how scared I was of not existing. And I woke up one day, I wasn't working, and I decided to take a trip to the beach, which was pretty far away. And I started driving out there, and I had this sense of impending doom. I felt like something really bad was about to happen. I started thinking about my death, thinking, am I going to get in a car accident? What is happening? It feels like something very serious, but I had been going through the awakening process for quite a while by then. And so I thought, most likely this is some sort of awakening thing. And because quite often before some type of vision would happen or awakening experience or shift, there would be this sense of dread. And so I almost started to enjoy that because I thought, oh, something exciting is about to happen. And I was right. My intuition was right. There was dread there for a reason, and it's because I was going to start to tap into this existential fear properly and deeply for the first time, I think. And so, as I got closer to the beach, I was talking to my friend and telling her about the fear that I had and trying to process it. And I started to really question it, like, why is this here? What is this about? And it felt a bit like a fear of death. And I was contemplating my death, certainly, because I wasn't sure whether I was actually about to die. And so I thought, well, I should probably think about what that means for me and whether I'm okay with that. And so I was sort of processing my death as I was just going about getting to the beach and getting myself sorted. And then the more I sort of sat with it, I realized, oh, actually, no, it's not death that I'm scared of. It's not existing. The mind had created an idea about awakening, and it wasn't true. So please let me explain. It had decided that um, it had realized that Shar didn't exist, which that bit is true. So it had gone deep enough to see that that is true. There is actually no Shah here. I really get it. I really get it now. I thought I got it before, but now I get it, and now I'm terrified because what does that mean if I don't exist? And it is a misinterpretation of understanding what existence means. But please let me just explain my story first before I clarify. So, if you're feeling a bit scared by this, I will clarify it and it'll become less scary, I promise. So, being in that fear, so going from fear of death to fear of obliteration or fear of just disappearing completely and just never being in existence again. It was really terrifying, but also intriguing and very deep. Something very deep within me had been activated, and I could really understand for the first time that I didn't exist as a separate person. The mind, however, interpreted it here as meaning it showed an image of me flying off into space or something similar into the void and just spinning away on my own, never to be found again. It created an image like that, which is pretty funny if you understand awakening, because again, that's projecting the separate self still being in existence, but its idea of not existing. So it's still incorrect because, again, in that there's separation, there's the person floating off into space, but this is just how this mind processed that. So it felt like I had to face that I didn't exist, which that one part was true as Shah. I was facing death, And everywhere around me, visually, because I used to get very strong visions, looked like an Armageddon situation. I was on a pretty beach with people relaxing. It should have been picturesque. And the way I was seeing is it looked like it was the end of the world and there was smoke and end of times, and yet nobody else could see it. It was truly bizarre. And I just carried on like normal. I think I was crying and shocked, probably looked shocked and scared, but I still just stayed there and wanted to see where it would go. And I could see like everyone is dying. As soon as they're born, they're dying. Like even those cute little children. And I found it sad and scary. And then I was like, I'm dying. I'm gonna die. And just the drama of it all. And so I was processing death, and then I was realizing, and I don't exist. So what does this mean for me? I'm dying and I don't exist. Where am I going to go? Really like a scary thing to face. And so the mind interpreted I was going to float off into oblivion as a separate self somewhere in the void and not be found, which is pretty funny to me now. But that's the way it interpreted non-existence, in a very separate kind of way. And so it shows you that you can have a deep realization of, I realize now that there is no separate self, but still buy into it a little bit. And that's why it takes a while to see through all of this illusion. So there was still the part of me that was believing it would be separate and floating off into space, which is not the bit that's not true. So the part that is true, and basically what happened that day, I had those realizations. It went for hours, and it was fun and scary and weird and lots of visuals. And then by the time I got home, everything was back to normal. And I had these deep realizations. I was left with the existential fear, and something had shifted from that point. And that fear remained with me to some degree from that point onwards, but there's something changed there. So that realization was important on the path. But what would I do, or what would I tell someone that was going through something similar to support them, that I probably didn't do at the time but may have done days later? And that would be to inquire into what does exist and what remains. And we can get so caught up in the fear of what is happening with a realization like that, and then the misinterpretation of what the mind is saying, and sort of spiral into some sort of fear response. And it's really unnecessary, because we're missing a big part of what this is about. So we're getting a lopsided view of what awakening is about. So one part is that the separate self doesn't exist. That's the part we really don't want to see. That's part that's hard to see and shocking for the psyche and the system to see. Typically, some people don't mind, but usually it's scary. But there's a whole other part, and that is the bit that is true. So that's the bit that's the illusion, but the bit that is true is that there is something in existence. It's just not a separate self. It's just never been people. And so I would suggest to someone, if they were going through something similar to what I went through then, to try to find that part experientially and ask a question along the lines of, but what is left? What remains? What does exist? Can you access that? Not think about it, but can you find it within you? Probably in meditation, but just to drop that inquiry in, but what remains? So yes, there's no separate self, but what is left? Is there anything left here? And this can very much soothe the existential fear, because it gives us the other half to what awakening is about, and that is that we do exist. We very much do, but just not as separate people. So the mind doesn't like that. The separate self, that conditioning that makes up what we believe is the separate self, doesn't like that. Of course, it doesn't want to hear that it doesn't exist. It's typically scary to hear that. But the truth is something so much greater than what the mind can understand. It's something that's really beautiful and an easy way to live from, and there's nothing bad about it. It just feels very foreign and scary to our limited conditioning that we've had all of our life, where we've believed we were this person. So it's just a shock more than anything, but there's nothing bad that's happening. So if this talk is resonating with you and you've been tapping into existential fear of non-existence, I would suggest you try to find the part that remains. What is left? And find out for yourself. So look in your own direct experience now. What remains when that idea of the separate self is gone? What is left here? Do you actually disappear? No, there's still a body, there's still thinking, there's sensations, there's pain, there's emotions. And then what's deeper? And we start to tap into the more spiritual answers. My being, things that I can't really label. Love, unconditional love for no reason, deep peace and stillness. All of that remains and will remain no matter how far you go on the awakening journey. There'll always be a body and what it means to have a body. And there'll also be the formless part of ourselves, the divine part of ourselves will also remain. The only bit that is going is really a belief in separation. But in that, it feels like the person goes or dies or dissolves or disappears. It's how it feels to experience it, but the reality is none of that happens. A belief in separation, a belief in the person is broken. And in that, then you get to just live life as divinity, as presence, as your being, in a human form, without all that confusion, which is really wonderful.